There's something psychology research keeps finding about people with extremely high intelligence that almost no one talks about. It isn't about what they think or how fast they think. It's about what they actually do. The small, almost invisible behaviors that show up in their daily lives when no one is watching. A high-functioning mind placed in an environment that wasn't built for it doesn't just exist there. It adapts. It develops strategies. It builds quiet rituals to survive a world that operates at a different speed and a different depth than the one inside its own head. And those strategies leave fingerprints, specific, recognizable behaviors you can observe if you know what to look for. Most of the people doing these things don't even realize they're unusual. They've been doing them so long it just feels like life. Here are 11 of them. Fire 1. They run a constant internal translator before they speak. The first behavior shows up in almost every conversation. Before a highly intelligent person says something out loud, they translate it. Not from another language, from their natural way of thinking into a flatter, simpler version that won't make the room uncomfortable. The thought arrives complex, with 3 or 4 layers, conditions, exceptions all attached. They strip it down. They cut the parts that would make someone feel small. By the time the sentence leaves their mouth, it's a fraction of what it started as. Sociologist Irving Goffman called this impression management, the constant performance we run to fit ourselves into the social moment. For highly intelligent people, that performance is heavier than for anyone else. They're not adjusting for politeness. They're adjusting for the gap between what their mind produced and what the room can hold. What looks like a quiet, agreeable person is often someone running a translation engine in the background of every interaction. 2. They rehearse conversations before having them and replay them after. The second behavior happens in private. Before an important conversation, a highly intelligent person rehearses it, not anxiously, strategically. They run scenarios, what the other person might say, how they'd respond, where it could go sideways, and afterwards, they replay it. Going back through the exchange, examining what they said, what they should have said, what they missed. Researchers call this post-event processing. What stands out in highly intelligent individuals is that the processing isn't driven by anxiety. It's driven by accuracy. They want to understand what actually happened underneath the surface of the words. The cost is invisible to everyone else. Conversations that take 10 minutes for most people take an hour of total mental time for them. The before, the during, and the after. 3. They withhold their best ideas in group settings. The third behavior is one of the most consistent and the least talked about. In group conversations or meetings, highly intelligent people often hold back what they actually think. Not because they're unsure, because they've learned what happens when they don't. Solomon Asch's classic conformity research showed that even average individuals will publicly agree with something they know is wrong to avoid standing apart from a group. For people whose internal answer is far more nuanced than what the group is converging on, that pressure compounds. There's a social cost to being right too early, too clearly, or too often. So they wait. They edit themselves down. They nod when something obvious gets stated as a revelation. The thing they actually came to say almost never gets said, and the room walks out thinking they didn't have much to contribute. 4. They build an exit strategy for every social event before they arrive. The fourth behavior is almost unconscious. Before walking into a social gathering, a highly intelligent person has already mapped the exit. They know how long they can stay. They know what their cover story is. They know which corner of the room they'll move toward if it gets too loud. This isn't social anxiety, although it can look like it. It's energy budgeting. Their cognitive system processes everything around them at a higher resolution. The conversations they aren't part of, the dynamics between people, the temperature shifts in the room. That processing happens whether they want it to or not, and it has a fuel cost. Research on introversion and recovery suggests that highly cognitive individuals deplete social fuel faster than average. The exit plan isn't avoidance. It's the difference between leaving on their own terms and leaving as a wreck. 5. They take on tasks below their capability on purpose. The fifth behavior surprises people who don't understand it. Highly intelligent individuals often choose roles, jobs, or projects deliberately below what they could do. They avoid the spotlight that comes with excellence. They settle into work that doesn't quite use them. Psychologist Sylvia Rim spent decades studying what she called gifted underachievement, the pattern of high-capacity individuals consistently producing below their level. What she found was that it isn't laziness. It's often a learned protective response. Visibility in their early life came with social cost. Staying just below the line is safer. The cost is enormous. A life spent slightly underextended is one where the most interesting version of the person never gets built. What looks like someone comfortable in a small role is often someone whose largest self is being deliberately kept off the stage. 6. They scan the room before they speak. The sixth behavior happens in the first 30 seconds of entering any group. Highly intelligent people read the room before they say anything. They notice who defers to whom. They track who's tense. They pick up on the conversation underneath the conversation. They build, almost instantly, a model of the social system they've just walked into. This kind of social attunement correlates strongly with general cognitive ability. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition applied to people. The cost is that they rarely feel relaxed in groups because they're never not analyzing. Even when they're laughing, part of them is mapping. The quiet person standing slightly back at the edge of the conversation is usually not the least engaged in the room. They're the one with the most complete picture of what's happening inside it. 7. They keep an entire inner world that no one ever sees. The seventh behavior is the loneliest one. Highly intelligent people maintain a private mental landscape. Half-built theories, recurring questions, ideas they've turned over for years, lines of thought they've never spoken to another human being. Not because they're secretive, because they've never met anyone who could receive them. Psychologist Lita Hollingworth studied highly gifted adults for decades and described this directly. She found their inner lives were unusually rich, unusually complex, and almost universally unshared. Not from arrogance, from the absence of an audience capable of holding the material. What looks like a reserved or private person is often someone carrying a full second life that has nowhere to land. And the longer it goes unshared, the harder it becomes to imagine that it ever could. 8. They explain things twice in their head before saying them once. The eighth behavior shows up in the small delay before they speak. A highly intelligent person processes what they want to say at 2 levels simultaneously. The first pass is for accuracy, getting the thought right. The second is for receivability, adjusting it so the person they're talking to can take it in. Theory of mind, the cognitive capacity to model another person's perspective, runs at higher resolution in highly intelligent individuals. They don't just say the thing. They imagine the thing being heard, predict how it will land, and revise it in advance. This is why they sometimes look like slow speakers, hesitant or searching for words. They're not searching. They're translating in real time across 2 channels. What gets read as uncertainty is almost always the opposite. It's a mind doing more work, not less. 9. They build deep intellectual relationships with people who aren't there. The 9th behavior is one many of them don't admit out loud. Highly intelligent people often form their closest intellectual relationships with authors, philosophers, scientists, even fictional characters. People they will never meet. People who have been dead for centuries. Psychologists Horton and Wohl introduced the concept of parasocial relationships to describe the one-sided bonds people form with media figures. For highly intelligent individuals, those bonds often run deeper than the friendships available around them because in those texts, they finally encounter someone working at the same depth they are. The cost is that real, present relationships can start to feel comparatively shallow. The conversations they want to have are happening on the page, not in the room. It isn't an avoidance of connection. It's connection, finally, with whoever was actually capable of it. Chapter 10. They downplay their accomplishments before anyone can respond to them. The 10th behavior is reflexive. Whenever a highly intelligent person is praised or recognized, they minimize it before the other person can react. They deflect. They credit luck, other people, timing, anything except their own capability. This is often misread as imposter syndrome. But research on imposter phenomenon describes a fear of being exposed as fraudulent. What's happening in many highly intelligent adults is different. It's learned concealment. They've spent years discovering that visible competence creates social friction, envy, distance, expectation. So they've made themselves smaller by reflex. The cost is that they're rarely seen at full size, by anyone, including themselves. What looks like humility is often a piece of armor worn so long it feels like skin. 11. They build private rituals around solitude. The 11th behavior is the one that anchors all the others. Highly intelligent people develop specific, repeated, almost sacred rituals of being alone. A particular hour of the morning, a specific walk, a chair by a window, a drive at night, a place no one else knows about. Environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan described what they called attention restoration, the cognitive recovery that happens when the mind is freed from social demand. For highly intelligent individuals, this isn't a luxury. It's where their actual self gets to come out and breathe. To the people around them, these rituals can look like withdrawal, like they're disappearing. That isn't quite it. When they're alone in that specific way, they're more themselves than they get to be at any other moment of the day. And without it, the version of them that walks back into the world has nothing left to give. What ties all 11 of these behaviors together is something the frame of personality doesn't capture well. These aren't quirks. They aren't traits. They are strategies. Coherent, intelligent, adaptive strategies developed by minds that learned early that the world wasn't quite built to hold them. The translator, the rehearsals, the withheld ideas, the exit plans, the deliberate underreaching, the room scanning, the unshared inner world, the double explanations, the dead intellectual companions, the reflexive self-minimizing, the private rituals. What gets diagnosed as anxiety, antisocial tendency, perfectionism, or self-sabotage is, in many cases, none of those things. It's a mind doing its honest best to live inside a context designed for something else. If you recognized yourself in this video, you aren't broken. You aren't too much. You've been doing what an intelligent mind does in an environment that doesn't match it, quietly, for a long time. The fact that no one ever saw the work doesn't mean the work wasn't happening. If this gave language to something you've carried without a name, leave a comment below and tell me which of the 11 hit closest. I read all of them. And if you'd like more videos that look at what psychology has actually found about minds like yours, the patterns, the costs, the quiet behaviors no one talks about, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. There's more in this direction, and I'd rather you were there for it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.